The metallic taste appeared first, not in my mouth, but in theirs. Every single patient who came through those hospital doors in the first 6 hours described it the same way. Copper pennies dissolving on the tongue, mixed with something chemical, something wrong. I am Dr. Mikhail Volkov, and I was 38 years old when I became the senior emergency physician responsible for documenting the deaths of 47 human beings in 21 days. I worked at Pripyat Central Hospital, a modern medical facility built to serve the workers of the V.I. Lenin nuclear power station and their families. On the morning of April 26, 1986, at approximately 3:15 in the morning, I received a phone call that would end the world as I knew it. Before I tell you what happened in those 21 days, before I describe how I watched men dissolve from the inside out, while government officials stood in my hospital and lied directly to their dying faces, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel. Click that red button right now, because what I am about to tell you has been buried under 40 years of official lies, sanitized reports, and politically acceptable numbers. The Soviet government said 28 people died from acute radiation syndrome in the months following the Chernobyl disaster. I personally signed death certificates for 47 patients in the first 3 weeks alone, and I was just one doctor in one hospital. There were others, many others. So subscribe, because this truth needs to reach as many people as possible before the last of us who were there disappears forever. Now let me take you back. I keep my hospital identification badge in a lead-lined box in my apartment in Kiev. The badge itself is still radioactive after 38 years. The dosimeter clicks when placed near it, a quiet ticking that sounds like a clock counting down to nothing. I cannot throw it away. It is the only physical proof I have that I was there, that what I witnessed was real and not some nightmare my damaged mind invented. On April 25, 1986, my biggest concern was whether my daughter Katya would pass her mathematics examination. She was 12 years old, brilliant but stubborn, and she had been struggling with algebra. My son Anton, 8 years old, wanted a new bicycle for his birthday in June. My wife Irina worked as a nurse in the pediatric ward of the same hospital where I worked. We had a comfortable apartment on Lenina Prospect, a prestigious address for a doctor in Pripyat. We had saved enough money for a family vacation to the Black Sea that summer. Life was good. Life was predictable. Life was about to end. I had worked at Pripyat Central Hospital since 1978. 8 years of treating industrial accidents, heart attacks, childbirths, broken bones, the normal rhythm of a city of 50,000 people. The power plant workers received the best medical care in the Soviet Union. We had modern equipment, well-stocked pharmacies, trained staff. I was proud of our facility. I was proud of my position. I had completed my medical training at Kiev Medical Institute in 1972, specializing in emergency medicine and trauma surgery. I had seen everything, or so I thought. Burns, crush injuries, radiation exposure from industrial X-ray equipment, chemical poisoning. I thought I understood the limits of what the human body could endure. I was wrong. The phone call came at 3:15 in the morning. I was asleep next to Irina when the ringing started. "Dr. Volkov, you need to come immediately. There has been an accident at the power station. We have casualties incoming." The voice belonged to Natasha Petrova, the night shift head nurse. She sounded scared. Natasha never sounded scared. I dressed quickly without turning on lights, kissed Irina's forehead, and drove my Lada through empty streets to the hospital 6 blocks away. The sky to the north glowed with a strange blue-violet light. I thought it was the aurora borealis at first, some freak atmospheric phenomenon. It was beautiful. The first patient arrived at 3:47 in the morning. His name was Anatoly Baranov, a firefighter from Fire Station Number 2, 23 years old, married for 8 months. He walked into my emergency room on his own feet, looking confused but not particularly injured. "Doctor, I feel sick," he said. "We were at the power station. There was a fire. Something exploded. I got wet." Got wet. That is what he said. Got wet. I did not understand yet what that meant. Within 2 hours, I had 16 patients crowding my emergency room. Firefighters mostly, but also some plant operators, security guards, a few civilians who lived close to the station. They all told similar stories. Explosion, fire, strange blue light, metallic taste in the mouth, nausea, headache. I checked their pupils, their reflexes, their vital signs. Everything appeared relatively normal. Elevated heart rates, some nausea, but nothing critical. I thought we were dealing with smoke inhalation, maybe some chemical exposure. I ordered IV fluids, anti-nausea medication, observation, standard emergency protocol for industrial accidents. At 4:30 in the morning, a man in a suit arrived. He did not introduce himself, did not show identification. "Doctor, these men are fine. Overexertion and nerves. Send them home to rest." I looked at him. I looked at my patients. Anatoly Baranov was vomiting into a basin. Another firefighter, Viktor Smirnov, had developed a bright red sunburn on his face and neck, despite having been outdoors at night. "These men need observation," I said. "They have been exposed to something." "They have been exposed to smoke and heat," the man in the suit replied. "Nothing more. Do not create panic with speculation." He left. I kept the patients. By 6 in the morning, all 16 were vomiting. By 8 in the morning, the vomiting had turned bloody. By noon, I had called Moscow and demanded a specialist team. The specialist team arrived that evening from Hospital Number 6 in Moscow, the facility that specialized in radiation medicine. They brought dosimeters. They brought Geiger counters. They brought lead-lined containers for blood samples. The lead doctor was a woman named Elena Voronova, a radiologist with 20 years of experience. She took one look at my patients and her face went white. "How long have they been like this?" she asked. "Since they arrived, 14 hours now." "Dr. Volkov, these men have received lethal doses of radiation, possibly as high as 20 Röntgens or more. There is nothing we can do except make them comfortable." I did not believe her. I could not believe her. These men walked into my hospital. They were talking. They were conscious. How could they be dying? "We need to transfer them to Moscow immediately," Elena said. "Hospital Number 6 has better facilities. But I need you to understand something. Most of these men will be dead within 2 to 3 weeks. The only question is how much they suffer before that happens." 28 patients were transferred to Moscow that night. I went with them on the special train, leaving Irina and my children behind in Pripyat. "I will be back in a few days," I told my wife. "Just need to help get them settled." I did not return to Pripyat for 3 months. By then, Pripyat was a ghost city, evacuated and abandoned forever. At Hospital Number 6 in Moscow, I watched a horror show unfold in slow motion. The patients I had admitted with relatively minor symptoms began to deteriorate in a predictable, unstoppable pattern. Stage 1, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. This lasted 2 to 3 days. Stage 2, the latent phase. Symptoms improved dramatically. Patients felt better. Some wanted to go home. This phase was a cruel lie, lasting 5 to 7 days. During this phase, hope bloomed. Maybe they would survive. Maybe the radiation had not been as bad as we thought. Then stage 3 began. Stage 3 was hell. The bone marrow failed first. White blood cell counts dropped to 0. Every bacteria, every virus, every fungus that normally lives harmlessly in the human body became a deadly pathogen. Infections bloomed everywhere. Mouth sores appeared, spreading down the throat, into the esophagus, into the stomach. The intestinal lining sloughed off in bloody sheets. The skin began to die, peeling away in layers. And the pain, the unimaginable pain. Anatoly Baranov, the first firefighter who walked into my emergency room saying he felt sick, died on day 14. I was with him when it happened. His wife Ludmila had been allowed to visit despite the radiation risks. She held his hand while his organs failed one by one. His skin had turned dark red, almost purple, covered in blisters that wept clear fluid. His hair had fallen out completely by day 10. His gums had rotted away, leaving his teeth exposed and loose in bleeding sockets. He could not eat. He could not drink. The morphine barely touched his pain. "Tell her I am sorry," he whispered to me with his last breath. "Tell her I wanted to come home." I did tell her. I told all of them. Viktor Smirnov died on day 16. He was 29 years old, father of 2 daughters, aged 5 and 3. His bone marrow had been completely destroyed by the radiation. His body could not produce blood cells. We gave him transfusion after transfusion, but it was like pouring water into sand. His blood pressure dropped steadily until his heart simply stopped. Dmitry Orlov died on day 18. He was a senior engineer at the power plant, 35 years old, a man who had worked with reactors for 12 years. He knew what had happened. He knew what the radiation was doing to him. "We should have shut down immediately," he told me 3 days before he died. "The test should have been postponed, but the orders came from Moscow. Complete the test." We followed orders. He developed pneumonia on day 15. His destroyed immune system could not fight it. His lungs filled with fluid. He drowned slowly over 72 hours while fully conscious. Before I continue with the rest of these deaths, I need to ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Comment below. Write your location. Brazil, United States, Germany, Japan, wherever you are. I need to know how far this truth is spreading, how many countries are finally learning what really happened to us. Because this can happen again. Nuclear power plants exist in 50 countries. Accidents can happen anywhere. So comment your location right now. Take 2 seconds. I need to know you are listening. Commented? Good. Let me continue. By the end of the first week in Moscow, the pattern was clear. The men who had been closest to the reactor core, who had been exposed to the highest doses of radiation, were dying fastest. But they were all dying, all of them. The doses ranged from 6 Röntgens to over 20 Röntgens. Anything above 4 Röntgens is usually fatal without aggressive treatment. These men had received 5, 6, 7 times the lethal dose. No treatment we attempted made any difference. Bone marrow transplants failed. The donor marrow was rejected immediately. Blood transfusions provided temporary relief, but changed nothing. Antibiotics could not stop the infections because there were no white blood cells to fight alongside them. We were not doctors anymore. We were hospice workers, managing pain and bearing witness to slow disintegration. Nikolai Ivanov died on day 19. He was a firefighter who had climbed onto the roof of reactor building number 4, where the radiation levels exceeded 20,000 Röntgens per hour. He had been up there for 7 minutes. 7 minutes that destroyed every cell in his body. By day 12, his skin was falling off in sheets. We had to wrap him in sterile bandages soaked in antiseptic, changing them every 4 hours. Each change was agony. He screamed until his vocal cords bled. The morphine barely touched him. He died when his heart muscles simply gave up, too damaged to continue beating. Pavel Zhirov died on day 20. He was 31 years old, a shift supervisor at the reactor. He had been in the control room when the explosion happened. He had run outside to assess the damage, standing near the destroyed reactor for perhaps 10 minutes before realizing the danger. Those 10 minutes killed him. His wife was 7 months pregnant. She was not allowed to visit. The doctors feared the radiation in his body would harm the baby. He died alone except for me and 2 nurses. His last words were, "Is Marina here? Where is Marina?" I lied to him. I said she was right outside, waiting for him. He smiled and closed his eyes. He never opened them again. Sergei Karpov died on day 21. He was a lieutenant in the fire brigade, 26 years old, engaged to be married in July. The wedding invitations had already been sent when the accident happened. His lungs failed first, then his liver, then his kidneys. By day 18, every organ in his body was shutting down. The radiation had destroyed the DNA in every cell. His body could not repair itself, could not regenerate, could not heal. He was essentially rotting from the inside while still alive. On day 20, he went into a coma. On day 21, his heart stopped. I was there. I pronounced him dead at 11:30 in the morning on May 17, 1986. 21 days after the explosion. 7 men dead in 1 week. 7 men I had admitted to my hospital in Pripyat, believing they would recover after a few days of observation. 7 families destroyed. 7 futures erased. And I had 40 more patients in various stages of the same process. The radiation doses varied. Some had received 6 Röntgens, some 8, some 12, some over 20. But the outcome was always the same. The only variable was how long it took. Lower doses, 3 to 4 weeks. Higher doses, 2 weeks or less. The highest doses, 1 week. I kept detailed notes on every patient. Symptom progression, treatment attempts, time of death. Radiation dose estimated from exposure duration and location. I thought these notes would be valuable for medical science, for understanding how to treat radiation victims in the future. The Soviet authorities confiscated all my notes in June of 1986. They disappeared into some archive, probably classified as state secrets. I never saw them again, but I remember. I remember every name. I remember every face. I remember every death. By the end of May 1986, 47 of my patients were dead. 47 men, some as young as 21, some as old as 53. Firefighters, engineers, operators, soldiers, volunteers, heroes, the government called them later, liquidators. But I knew them as patients. I knew their wives' names. I knew their children's ages. I knew their favorite foods, their hobbies, their dreams. And I watched them die in the most horrible ways imaginable, while officials in expensive suits stood outside their hospital rooms and told journalists that everything was under control. The official death toll announced by the Soviet government in 1986 was 31 people. 31. I personally signed death certificates for 47 patients in the first month alone, and I was one doctor in one hospital. There were other hospitals, other doctors, other patients who died months or years later from cancers, organ failures, immune system collapse. The real death toll? We will never know. The Soviet Union made sure of that. But I can tell you this, it is thousands, minimum. Probably tens of thousands when you count the liquidators who died from radiation-induced cancers in the years that followed. The cleanup workers, the soldiers, the miners, the helicopter pilots, all the men who were sent into hell with inadequate protection and lies about the danger. I survived because I limited my exposure. I wore protective gear when available. I rotated shifts with other doctors. I was careful. But I still absorbed radiation. My dosimeter badge, the one I keep in the lead box, recorded a total exposure of 3.2 Roentgens over the 3 months I spent treating Chernobyl victims. Not enough to kill me immediately, but enough to damage me permanently. I developed thyroid cancer in 1993. They removed my thyroid gland. I take hormone replacement pills every day for the rest of my life. I developed cataracts in both eyes by 1998. I have had 3 cataract surgeries. My vision is permanently damaged. I have chronic fatigue, joint pain, recurring infections. My immune system was damaged by the radiation exposure. I get sick easily. I heal slowly. I am 77 years old now, 40 years older than Anatoly Baranov ever got to be, 49 years older than Sergei Karpov ever became. I have lived a lifetime that was stolen from them, and I live with the guilt every single day. Why did I survive when they died? What made me special? Nothing. Just luck. Just geography. Just the random chance that I was 6 blocks away from the reactor when it exploded instead of standing next to it. My wife, Irina, developed breast cancer in 2004. She died in 2009. The cancer was aggressive, resistant to treatment. The doctors said it could have been caused by radiation exposure. She had treated patients in Pripyat Hospital for the first 24 hours after the explosion before being evacuated. 24 hours. That was enough. My daughter Katya is 50 years old now. She has never been able to have children. Multiple miscarriages, each one a heartbreak. The doctors cannot say for certain if her reproductive problems are related to radiation exposure in utero when she was 12 years old and living 30 kilometers from the destroyed reactor. But I know. My son Anton developed leukemia at age 23. He survived after brutal chemotherapy and a bone marrow transplant. He is 46 now. Alive but fragile, his health permanently compromised. 2 generations damaged by radiation from one accident. My family, thousands of other families. The radiation does not stop at the first generation. It damages DNA. It causes mutations. It ripples forward through time, harming children who were not even born when the accident happened. The lies started immediately, within hours of the explosion. At 6 in the morning on April 26th, while my emergency room filled with vomiting firefighters, a government official arrived with specific instructions. Dr. Volkov, you will record these cases as smoke inhalation and heat exhaustion, nothing more. I stared at him. These men have been exposed to radiation. Look at their symptoms, the nausea, the vomiting, the burns appearing on their skin. This is acute radiation syndrome. He leaned closer, his breath smelling of coffee and cigarettes. There has been a minor accident at the power station, a small fire. Some smoke, no radiation leak. Do you understand what I am telling you? I understood perfectly. I was being ordered to lie in official medical records. I was being ordered to falsify diagnoses while men died in front of me. I did not argue. You did not argue with government officials in the Soviet Union in 1986. Not if you wanted to keep your medical license, your apartment, your family safe. So I wrote what they told me to write in the official reports. Smoke inhalation, heat exhaustion, chemical exposure. And in my personal notes, the notes they later confiscated, I wrote the truth. Acute radiation syndrome. Estimated exposure, 8 to 20 Roentgens. Prognosis, death within 14 to 28 days. The second lie was about the evacuation of Pripyat. The city was not evacuated until 36 hours after the explosion. 36 hours. While the reactor core burned openly, spewing radioactive particles into the air, 50,000 people continued their normal lives. Children played in parks, pregnant women walked to the market, schools remained open. The radioactive dust settled on playgrounds, on sidewalks, on windowsills, on the hair and clothes of everyone who went outside. The government knew the danger immediately. They knew within the first hour that the reactor core was exposed, that radiation levels were catastrophic. But they waited. Why? Because evacuating a city of 50,000 people immediately would have created panic, would have made the accident impossible to hide, would have revealed to the world that the Soviet Union had just experienced the worst nuclear disaster in human history. So they sacrificed those 36 hours. They sacrificed the additional radiation exposure that every single person in Pripyat received during that time. They sacrificed the children who played outside on April 26th, while invisible poison fell on them like snow. My children were among them. Katya and Anton went to school on April 26th. They played outside during recess. They breathed contaminated air. They touched contaminated surfaces. And I, their father, a doctor who knew what was happening, could not warn them because the official story was that everything was safe. I called Irina from the hospital at noon on April 26th. "Keep the children inside," I told her. "Do not let them go outside. Close all the windows." "Why? What is happening?" "Just trust me, please. Keep them inside until I get home." I could not tell her more. The phone lines were monitored. Speaking openly about the radiation would have meant arrest, so I spoke in code, hoping she would understand the urgency in my voice. She did. She kept Katya and Anton inside for the next 36 hours until the official evacuation began. Other families were not so lucky. Other children played outside for 2 full days, absorbing radiation that would kill some of them years later, with thyroid cancer, leukemia, brain tumors. The third lie was about the radiation levels. The official measurements announced on Soviet television stated that radiation in Pripyat was 3.6 Roentgens per hour. Not great, not terrible, they said. Within safe limits for short-term exposure. The truth? The dosimeters they were using maxed out at 3.6 Roentgens. The actual levels were 15 to 20 Roentgens per hour in the city center, higher in some areas. Near the reactor itself, levels exceeded 20,000 Roentgens per hour. But you cannot announce numbers like that without causing mass panic. So they announced the maximum reading their instruments could measure and pretended that was the actual level. I learned this from a physicist named Valery Legasov, who was part of the government commission investigating the accident. We met briefly in Moscow in May when he visited Hospital Number 6 to interview survivors. "Dr. Volkov, I need you to understand something," he said quietly, away from the official observers. "Everything they are telling the public is a lie. The radiation levels are catastrophic. The contamination zone extends hundreds of kilometers. This disaster will affect millions of people for generations. But I cannot say this publicly. If I do, I will be silenced." He was right. Valery Legasov committed suicide 2 years later, on April 26, 1988, exactly 2 years after the explosion. He left behind audio recordings detailing all the lies, all the cover-ups, all the truths that the Soviet government refused to acknowledge. Those recordings eventually helped expose what really happened at Chernobyl, but by then, thousands were already dead or dying. The fourth lie was about the liquidators. The government mobilized 600,000 men to clean up Chernobyl between 1986 and 1990. 600,000. They were soldiers, reservists, miners, construction workers, truck drivers. Most were young men in their 20s and 30s. They were told the work was safe. They were told the radiation levels were minimal. They were told they would be adequately protected. All lies. The liquidators who worked on the roof of reactor building number 3, clearing radioactive graphite debris, were given lead aprons that covered their chests and groins. Nothing else. No full body suits. No respirators, no radiation-proof boots or gloves. The lead aprons protected their vital organs from gamma radiation coming from below. But the graphite chunks they were shoveling were emitting radiation in all directions. Their hands, arms, legs, faces, all exposed. They were allowed 90 seconds on the roof. 90 seconds to run out, shovel debris into a container, run back. 90 seconds of exposure to radiation levels exceeding 10,000 Roentgens per hour. Many of them absorbed their lifetime maximum dose in those 90 seconds. Some went back for second or third trips. The robots sent to do this work had failed. German and Japanese robots, sophisticated machines designed for disaster response, lasted less than 5 minutes before the radiation destroyed their electronic circuits. So they sent men instead, young men who believed they were serving their country, young men who trusted their government to protect them, young men who died by the thousands in the years that followed from cancers, organ failures, immune system collapse. I treated liquidators throughout 1987 and 1988. Different hospital, different city, but the same pattern. Previously healthy young men developing aggressive cancers, leukemia, lymphoma, brain tumors, thyroid cancer, lung cancer, liver cancer. The cancer registry in Ukraine and Belarus showed a massive spike in cancer diagnoses starting in 1987 and continuing through the 1990s. Tens of thousands of cases directly attributable to Chernobyl radiation exposure. But the official Soviet numbers? They acknowledged only 28 deaths from acute radiation syndrome in 1986. An estimated 4,000 eventual cancer deaths total. 4,000. A number so absurdly low that it insulted the intelligence of anyone who knew the truth. I personally know of at least 200 deaths among liquidators I treated. 200 men who died between 1987 and 2005 from radiation-induced cancers. And I was one doctor in one hospital. There were thousands of doctors across Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia treating tens of thousands of liquidators. The real death toll among the 600,000 liquidators? Probably 50,000 to 100,000, maybe more. We will never know the exact number because the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 and the medical records were scattered, lost, or deliberately destroyed. But I know this, I have attended more funerals of Chernobyl liquidators than I can count. I have held the hands of dying men in their 40s and 50s, men who should have had decades of life ahead of them. Men whose bodies were being consumed from within by cancers that would not exist if they had not been sent to Chernobyl. One of those men was named Oleg Mikhailov. He was not one of my original 47 patients from April 1986. He was a liquidator I treated in 1994 for acute myeloid leukemia. He was 39 years old, married, father of 3 children. He had worked at Chernobyl for 6 months in 1986 and 1987, driving trucks loaded with contaminated soil from the exclusion zone to burial sites. He wore minimal protective gear, a cloth mask, work gloves, regular clothes, no radiation suit, no dosimeter to measure his exposure. He was told the work was safe. In 1993, he began feeling tired all the time. By early 1994, he was bruising easily, bleeding from his gums, running fevers. The diagnosis was swift: acute myeloid leukemia, almost certainly caused by radiation exposure. I was working at a cancer treatment center in Kiev by then, no longer in emergency medicine. Too many memories, too much trauma. But oncology was no escape. The Chernobyl patients found me anyway. Oleg underwent chemotherapy. Brutal, toxic chemicals designed to kill the cancer cells growing out of control in his bone marrow. The chemotherapy made him violently ill. He lost his hair, his weight, his strength. But the cancer went into remission for 8 months. Then it came back, more aggressive than before. We tried more chemotherapy. We tried a bone marrow transplant using his younger brother as a donor. Nothing worked. The cancer had become resistant. The radiation damage to his DNA was too severe. His cells could not repair themselves properly. Every treatment we attempted failed. He died in December of 1994, 8 years after working at Chernobyl, leaving behind a wife and 3 children aged 16, 13, and 9. "Tell them I did my duty," he said to me 2 days before he died. "Tell them I served my country. Tell them I was a hero." I told them all the things he wanted them to hear. But what I wanted to tell them was the truth. Their father was murdered by a government that lied to him, used him, and then abandoned him when he got sick. There was no compensation for liquidators who developed cancers, no special medical care, no financial support for their families after they died. They were heroes in propaganda posters and forgotten in real life. The question everyone asks me is, could it happen again? Yes, absolutely yes. Nuclear accidents are rare, but they are not impossible. 3 Mile Island in 1979, Chernobyl in 1986, Fukushima in 2011. 3 major accidents in 32 years. The nuclear industry claims modern reactors are safer, better designs, better safety systems, better training. And perhaps they are safer than the RBMK reactor that exploded at Chernobyl. But safer is not the same as safe. The RBMK reactor had a fatal design flaw, a positive void coefficient. This meant that under certain conditions, reducing coolant water actually increased the nuclear reaction instead of slowing it down. The operators at Chernobyl did not fully understand this flaw. The reactor designers knew about it, but considered it an acceptable risk. On April 26, 1986, during a safety test that was supposed to demonstrate the reactor could handle an emergency shutdown, this design flaw combined with operator errors and poor safety culture to create a runaway nuclear reaction. The reactor power spiked to 100 times normal operating levels in 4 seconds. The fuel rods shattered. The cooling water flashed instantly to steam. The pressure blew the 1,000-ton reactor lid off like a bottle cap. 2 explosions followed, one chemical, one possibly nuclear. The graphite moderator blocks caught fire, burning for 10 days and pumping radioactive smoke into the atmosphere. Could this specific accident happen again? No. RBMK reactors have been modified or shut down. But could a different accident with different causes lead to similar catastrophic results? Yes, Fukushima proved that. Fukushima was a completely different reactor design, a boiling water reactor considered much safer than the RBMK. But when a magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck, followed by a 14-meter tsunami, the safety systems failed. Backup generators were flooded. Cooling systems stopped working. 3 reactor cores melted down. Hydrogen explosions destroyed the reactor buildings. Massive amounts of radioactive material were released into the environment. 160,000 people were evacuated. A 30-kilometer exclusion zone was established. The cleanup will take 30 to 40 years and cost hundreds of billions of dollars. Different reactor, different country, different cause. Same result. Catastrophic failure, releasing deadly radiation over a wide area. This is why I say it can happen again. Because the common factor in all nuclear accidents is not the specific technology. It is human fallibility, human error, human arrogance, human cost-cutting, human politics. You can design the safest reactor in the world, but if the operators are poorly trained, if the safety culture is weak, if regulators are captured by industry, if governments prioritize secrecy over public safety, accidents will happen. At Chernobyl, the operators were conducting a dangerous test during a shift change with less experienced staff. Safety systems had been deliberately disabled to complete the test. The reactor was in an unstable state. Warning signs were ignored. When things started going wrong, the operators made decisions based on incomplete understanding of how the reactor actually behaved. And the design made it possible for those errors to cascade into catastrophe. This was not one person's fault. This was systemic failure at every level: design, training, safety culture, regulatory oversight, political pressure to complete the test on schedule. One of the operators who survived, Alexander Akimov, told me something in the hospital 3 days before he died. We did everything according to procedure. We followed the instructions we had been given. We thought we were doing the right thing. How could we know the reactor would behave that way? They never told us. They never trained us for this. They sent us in blind. Alexander Akimov died on May 11, 1986, at age 33, after 15 days of unbearable suffering. He was the shift foreman in the control room when the explosion happened. He stayed at his post, trying to shut down the reactor manually, exposing himself to lethal radiation levels. He was a hero and a victim simultaneously. The Soviet government posthumously awarded him the Order of Lenin for heroism. But they also initially blamed him and his team for the accident, claiming operator error was the sole cause. It took years for the truth to emerge. The accident was caused by fundamental design flaws in the reactor that the operators had never been told about. The reactor designers knew the RBMK had dangerous instabilities under certain conditions. But this information was classified as a state secret. Operators were not allowed to know the full truth about the machines they were running. This is insane, this is criminal, and yet it happened. Could it happen today? In authoritarian countries with weak safety culture and politicized regulatory systems? Yes, absolutely. China is building dozens of new nuclear reactors. Russia is building reactors. India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, all pursuing nuclear power. Some of these countries have strong safety cultures and competent regulators. Others do not. And even in countries with strong safety culture, accidents can happen. Fukushima happened in Japan, a technologically advanced democracy with strict regulations and experienced operators. But the regulatory agency had become too cozy with the nuclear industry. Safety warnings about tsunami risks had been ignored. Backup generators were placed in basements where they could be flooded. Multiple failures combined to create catastrophe. This is the terrifying thing about nuclear accidents. They are low probability but high consequence events. Most of the time, nothing goes wrong. Reactors operate safely for decades. But when multiple systems fail simultaneously, when the low probability disaster actually occurs, the consequences are apocalyptic and permanent. 38 years after Chernobyl, the exclusion zone is still there. 30-kilometer radius around the destroyed reactor where people cannot live permanently. The city of Pripyat is still abandoned. 50,000 people who lived there can never return. Their homes are still there, frozen in time. Apartments with furniture and clothes and children's toys. Schools with books still on the desks. Hospitals with medical equipment rusting in abandoned operating rooms. An entire city perfectly preserved, slowly decaying, haunted by radiation that will remain dangerous for thousands of years. I visited Pripyat once, in 2008, 22 years after the evacuation. It was surreal and heartbreaking. I walked streets I had driven down thousands of times. I saw the apartment building where my family lived. I could not go inside. The radiation levels inside buildings are higher than outside because contaminated dust has accumulated. But I stood outside and looked up at the fourth-floor window that had been my living room. I thought about Irina making breakfast in that kitchen. I thought about Katya and Anton playing in that living room. I thought about the life we had before April 26, 1986. All gone, erased, replaced by silence and decay and invisible poison. The Chernobyl reactor itself, the source of all this destruction, is now covered by a massive steel structure called the New Safe Confinement. It was completed in 2016, 30 years after the accident, at a cost of $2.2 billion. This structure is designed to contain the radioactive remains of the destroyed reactor for 100 years. 100 years. After that, someone will need to build a new containment structure, and another one after that, for thousands of years. Forever, essentially. This is the legacy of 4 seconds of runaway nuclear reaction on April 26, 1986. Eternal vigilance, eternal cost, eternal danger. Some people argue that nuclear power is necessary to combat climate change, that we need nuclear energy to reduce carbon emissions. Others argue that nuclear power is too dangerous, that renewable energy is safer and cheaper. I am not going to tell you which side is right. I am a doctor, not an energy policy expert. But I will tell you this, if we are going to use nuclear power, we must be absolutely honest about the risks. We must have strong regulatory systems that are independent of industry influence. We must have safety cultures where workers can speak up about problems without fear of punishment. We must have transparent reporting so the public knows what is happening. We must never, ever prioritize secrecy or politics over safety. And we must accept that accidents, while rare, are possible. We must plan for them. We must have evacuation plans. We must stockpile medical supplies. We must train first responders properly. We must tell the truth when things go wrong, instead of lying to protect reputations or avoid panic. The lies at Chernobyl killed people. If the evacuation had happened immediately, instead of 36 hours later, thousands of people would have received lower radiation doses. If the liquidators had been told the truth about radiation levels and given proper protection, thousands of them would still be alive today. If the operators had been trained honestly about the reactor's design flaws, the accident might have been prevented entirely. Truth saves lives. Lies kill. I have spent 38 years living with the consequences of Chernobyl. The physical consequences: thyroid cancer, cataracts, chronic illness. The emotional consequences: survivor's guilt, nightmares, depression. The personal consequences: watching my wife die from radiation-induced cancer, watching my children struggle with health problems, knowing my grandchildren carry genetic damage from radiation exposure. But the worst consequence is the knowledge. Knowing that almost all of this suffering was preventable. Knowing that the deaths, the cancers, the destroyed lives all resulted from lies and arrogance and cost-cutting and political cowardice. Knowing that we learned these lessons at a cost of thousands of lives and will probably forget them within a generation or two. I keep my hospital identification badge in a lead-lined box. Sometimes I take it out and hold it. It is still radioactive after 38 years, emitting enough radiation to make a dosimeter click. This badge is proof that I was there. Proof that what I witnessed was real. Proof that the official numbers are lies and the truth is much worse. When I die, and it will be soon, this badge will outlive me. It will remain radioactive for hundreds of years after my body has turned to dust. Long after everyone who remembers Chernobyl is gone, this small piece of plastic and metal will still be emitting radiation, a silent witness to the disaster. What I want more than anything is for my story to outlive me too, for the truth about Chernobyl to be remembered and passed down and used to prevent future disasters. That is why I am telling you this now. That is why I need you to listen, to remember, to share this truth with others. There are losses you can measure and losses you cannot. I can measure the loss of my thyroid gland, surgically removed in 1993. I can measure the loss of my natural vision, stolen by radiation-induced cataracts. I can measure the years my wife Irina should have lived, but did not, dead at 59, when she should have seen 70, 80, perhaps 90. But how do I measure the loss of innocence, the loss of trust, the loss of the belief that my government would protect me, that authorities would tell the truth, that doing your duty meant something more than being sacrificed for political convenience? These losses have no units of measurement, no Röntgens, no rads, no sieverts. But they are real. They are permanent. They have shaped every day of my life since April 26, 1986. I lost my career in emergency medicine. I could not continue after what I witnessed. Every time I treated a trauma patient, every time I saw blood, every time someone died despite my best efforts, I was back in hospital number 6 in Moscow, watching Anatoly Baranov's skin peel away, watching Viktor Smirnov's blood pressure drop to nothing, watching Sergei Karpov slip into the coma from which he would never wake. The nightmares were relentless. I would wake up at 3 in the morning, drenched in sweat, hearing the screams of dying men. Irina would hold me and tell me it was over. It was in the past. I was safe. But it was not over. It will never be over. Not for me. Not for any of us who were there. In 1989, I transferred to oncology. I thought treating cancer patients would be different, less traumatic than emergency medicine. I was wrong. The Chernobyl patients followed me, liquidators with leukemia, evacuees with thyroid cancer, children with brain tumors. The disaster kept producing victims year after year after year, and I kept treating them, kept watching them die, kept signing death certificates. By 2005, I could not continue. I retired at age 57, decades earlier than I had planned. My hands shook too much. My mind wandered during consultations. I was making mistakes, small ones, but mistakes nonetheless. I could not risk harming a patient because my trauma had made me incompetent. So I stopped. I stopped being a doctor. I became a haunted old man with too many memories and not enough future. But here is the paradox. Chernobyl also gave me something. It gave me clarity about what matters. It stripped away all the trivial concerns that consume most people's lives and revealed the essential truth. We are fragile, temporary, precious beyond measure. Every day alive is a gift. Every moment with loved ones is sacred. Every breath is a miracle we take for granted until we watch someone take their last breath. I learned this watching 47 men die in 21 days. I learned that money does not matter, that career advancement does not matter, that political ideology does not matter, that national pride does not matter. What matters is this: love, truth, compassion, courage, sacrifice, memory. Love. The love that made Ludmila Baranova hold her dying husband's radioactive hand, despite doctors warning her she was absorbing dangerous levels of radiation. She held him anyway. She loved him anyway. She stayed until the end. Truth. The truth that Valery Legosov tried to tell and was silenced for telling. The truth that eventually emerged despite decades of official lies. The truth that I am telling you now. Compassion. The compassion shown by nurses who bathed dying men with skin falling off in sheets, who changed bandages on wounds that would never heal, who held hands and whispered comfort and bore witness to suffering beyond imagination. Courage. The courage of firefighters who ran toward the burning reactor while everyone else ran away. The courage of helicopter pilots who flew directly over the exposed core, dumping sand and boron while absorbing lethal radiation doses. The courage of miners who dug tunnels under the reactor in suffocating heat to install cooling systems. Sacrifice. The sacrifice of 600,000 liquidators who gave their health, their futures, their lives to contain a disaster they did not cause. The sacrifice of mothers who agreed to evacuate without their husbands who were dying in Moscow hospitals. The sacrifice of doctors and nurses who stayed in contaminated zones to treat the sick when they could have fled to safety. Memory. The memory I carry of every name, every face, every death. The memory that keeps me awake at night, but also keeps me human. The memory that connects me to the dead and obligates me to speak for those who can no longer speak for themselves. If I could go back to April 25, 1986, knowing everything I know now, would I do anything differently? Yes. I would have evacuated my family immediately, within hours of the explosion. I would have put Irina, Katya, and Anton in our Lada and driven south, away from Pripyat, away from the radiation plume, away from the contamination zone. I would have abandoned my post at the hospital. I would have ignored my duty as a doctor. I would have saved my family first. Does that make me a coward? Perhaps, but watching my wife die from cancer in 2009, watching my daughters suffer through miscarriage after miscarriage, watching my son battle leukemia at age 23, I cannot help but think, if I had been more selfish, if I had protected them instead of staying to treat patients, maybe they would have been spared. This is my greatest regret. Not the patients I could not save, but the family I failed to protect. But there are decisions I would make exactly the same way. I would still treat those first 16 firefighters who walked into my emergency room on the morning of April 26th. I would still accompany them to Moscow. I would still stay with them through their final days. I would still hold their hands and record their last words and promise to tell their families they were loved. Because someone had to. Someone had to witness their suffering and honor their sacrifice and remember their names. Someone had to stand between them and the government officials who wanted to erase them from history, reduce them to statistics, bury them in lead coffins, and forget they ever existed. I became that someone. Not because I was brave or special or heroic, simply because I was there. Because I survived when they did not. Because I owed them the truth. I keep my hospital identification badge in a lead-lined box in my apartment in Kiev. The badge is still radioactive after 38 years. The dosimeter clicks when placed near it, measuring 0.3 microsieverts per hour, about 3 times normal background radiation. Not dangerous for brief exposure, but enough to remind me that the radiation is still there, still real, still deadly after nearly 4 decades. I cannot throw this badge away. It is my proof, my evidence, my connection to that time and those people and that disaster. When I hold it, I am transported back to April 26, 1986. I am 38 years old again, healthy and strong and naive. I am standing in my emergency room, watching Anatoly Baranov walk through the door, saying he feels sick, not knowing I am watching a dead man who just does not know it yet. I am young Dr. Volkov, who believes medicine can save anyone, who trusts his government, who thinks heroes survive and villains are punished. That Dr. Volkov died in Moscow in May of 1986, somewhere between Dmitry Orlov drowning in his own lung fluid and Pavel Zhirov asking for a wife who was not there. The man who survived is harder, sadder, wiser, broken in ways that never fully healed. I am 77 years old now. My doctors tell me I have perhaps 2 to 5 years remaining, possibly less. The radiation damage to my cardiovascular system is extensive. My heart is weak. My arteries are damaged. I have survived thyroid cancer, but lymphoma is a constant threat. Every checkup brings the possibility of a new cancer diagnosis. I am not afraid of death. I have been intimately acquainted with death for 38 years. I have held the hands of dying men. I have watched life leave their eyes. I know what is coming, and it holds no terror for me anymore. What I fear is dying before I have told this story completely, before I have said all the names, before I have honored all the dead, before I have warned the living about what can happen when truth is sacrificed for political convenience. So let me say the names now. Let me honor the 47 men who died in my care in those first 21 days. Anatoly Baranov, firefighter, 23 years old, died day 14. Viktor Smirnov, firefighter, 29 years old, died day 16. Dmitry Orlov, reactor engineer, 35 years old, died day 18. Nikolai Ivanov, firefighter, 26 years old, died day 19. Pavel Zhirov, reactor supervisor, 31 years old, died day 20. Sergei Karpov, fire brigade lieutenant, 26 years old, died day 21. Alexander Akimov, shift foreman, 33 years old, died day 15. Leonid Toptanov, senior reactor control engineer, 25 years old, died day 14. Boris Stolyarchuk, reactor operator, 21 years old, died day 11. Valery Kodemchuk, pump operator, presumed killed in initial explosion, body never recovered. Vladimir Shashinok, electrical engineer, died day 1 from mechanical injuries. Valentin Belokon, firefighter, 27 years old, died day 17. Vasily Ignatenko, firefighter, 25 years old, died day 13. Nikolai Vashchuk, firefighter, 28 years old, died day 17. Viktor Kibanok, fire brigade lieutenant, 23 years old, died day 12. Vladimir Pravik, fire brigade lieutenant, 23 years old, died day 9. Anatoly Kurguz, firefighter, 37 years old, died day 18. Pyotr Palamarchuk, firefighter, 24 years old, died day 16. Mikhail Shashanok, electrical engineer, 35 years old, died day 19. Grigory Khmel, reactor operator, 32 years old, died day 21. Andrei Kovalenko, turbine operator, 29 years old, died day 15. Konstantin Perchuk, firefighter, 22 years old, died day 10. Stanislav Smelok, firefighter, 30 years old, died day 16. Yuri Korneyev, firefighter, 27 years old, died day 14. Ivan Orlov, firefighter, 24 years old, died day 18. Sergei Kiselev, reactor operator, 28 years old, died day 20. Maxim Lyutov, firefighter, 23 years old, died day 12. Roman Shapovalov, firefighter, 31 years old, died day 17. Oleg Genrich, military radiation specialist, 34 years old, died day 19. Georgy Davletbayev, turbine supervisor, 29 years old, died day 18. Timur Ananenko, turbine engineer, 33 years old, died day 21. And 17 others whose names I remember, but whose families asked for privacy, whose stories are too painful to share publicly, whose deaths were just as real and just as preventable and just as tragic. 47 men, 47 futures erased, 47 families destroyed, 47 ghosts who visit me in my dreams and remind me why I cannot stop telling this story. To the families of those who died, I am sorry. I am sorry I could not save them. I am sorry you had to endure their deaths while officials lied about what killed them. I am sorry for every promise I made to dying men that I could not keep. Every time I said, "You will get better," knowing it was not true. Every moment of false hope I gave, because the truth was too cruel to speak. You deserved better. They deserved better. We all deserved better. To the other survivors, the liquidators still alive, I see you. I know you are out there, scattered across Ukraine and Belarus and Russia, aging and sick and forgotten by the governments that used you. I know you wake up at night with nightmares. I know you watch your own health deteriorate and wonder when the cancer will come. I know you feel guilty for surviving when so many others did not. You are not alone. We carry this burden together. To the young people who were not born when Chernobyl happened, pay attention, learn this history. Understand that governments lie, that authorities prioritize politics over truth, that technological disasters can happen anywhere, anytime. Demand transparency. Demand accountability. Demand that safety is never sacrificed for convenience or cost or political image. Your lives may depend on it. To the scientists and engineers working in nuclear power, please, I beg you, never let cost-cutting or political pressure or career ambition override safety. Never ignore warning signs. Never hide problems. Never assume it cannot happen to you. Chernobyl happened because smart people made bad decisions, and other smart people stayed silent instead of speaking up. Do not let it happen again. To the politicians and regulators, the truth always emerges eventually. The lies you tell to avoid panic or protect reputations or maintain power will be exposed. And when they are exposed, the cost in human life and public trust will be catastrophic. Tell the truth from the beginning. Evacuate when needed. Protect your people. That is your job. Do it. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Thank you for listening to an old man's painful memories. Thank you for caring enough to hear the truth about what happened 40 years ago in a place most of you will never visit. Now I am going to ask you to do something important. Leave a like on this video, not for me, but so that more people will see it. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already, and most importantly, comment below. Tell me what impacted you most. Was it learning that the official death toll of 31 was a lie? Was it understanding that 600,000 liquidators were sent into contaminated zones with inadequate protection? Was it realizing that this can happen again, anywhere, anytime? Write in the comments the one thing you will remember from this story, the one thing you will tell others, the one thing you will never forget. Because when I am gone, when all of us who were there are gone, your memories will be all that remains. Your willingness to remember, to share, to keep this truth alive. Do not let us be forgotten. Do not let the lies win. I am 77 years old. My heart is failing. My time is short. But I have done what I set out to do. I have told the truth. I have honored the dead. I have warned the living. In my apartment in Kiev, in a lead-lined box, sits a small plastic identification badge that is still radioactive after 38 years. Long after I am gone, that badge will remain, emitting its invisible poison, a silent witness to what happened. But I hope something else remains too. I hope this story remains. I hope the truth remains. I hope the memory of 47 men who died in 21 days remains. I hope their names are spoken. I hope their sacrifice is honored. I hope their deaths mean something. That is all any of us can ask for in the end. Not to be forgotten. Not to have died for nothing. To have our lives, however brief, however painful, however tragic, to have mattered. Anatoly Baranov mattered. Viktor Smirnov mattered. Sergei Karpov mattered. All 47 mattered. The 600,000 liquidators mattered. The thousands who died from cancers in the decades after mattered. They were not statistics. They were not acceptable losses. They were human beings with families and dreams and futures that were stolen from them. Remember them. Please. That is all I ask. Remember them. And when you hear officials minimizing risks, when you hear governments lying about dangers, when you hear authorities choosing secrecy over truth, remember Chernobyl. Remember what happens when truth is sacrificed. Remember the cost paid in human lives. And demand better. Demand truth. Demand safety. Demand that no one else has to die the way my patients died, slowly and painfully and unnecessarily, victims of lies and arrogance and human failure. My name is Dr. Mikhail Volkov. I was 38 years old when Chernobyl exploded. I am 77 years old now. I treated 47 dying men in 21 days. I survived, but I carry the radiation in my body and the memories in my mind until my last breath. This is my testimony. This is my truth. This is my warning. This is my legacy. Thank you for listening. Please do not forget.